This is Excel Tips, a podcast for accounting and finance professionals, brought to you by CPA Australia.
Welcome to Excel Tips. My name is Neil Blackwood, and in this episode, I wanted to discuss the Pareto principle and Excel. Excel has lots of built-in functions and features that work really well with Pareto analysis. Now, the Pareto principle is probably more commonly known as the 80-20 rule. And the usual business example is that 80% of your sales might be driven by 20% of your clients. Now, Pareto was an Italian sociologist/economist, and he noticed that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. So this relationship can be really useful to identify the areas that you need to focus on, which is typically the idea behind the 80-20 rule. Now, it is working on percentages, and 80 plus 20 does equal 100, but that's not part of the rule, okay? So the relationships don't have to add up to 100. It's basically a small percentage of one thing drives a large percentage of another. So it might be that 15% of your clients drive 75% of your sales. So it doesn't have to add up to 100 for the 80-20 rule. Now, Excel has many built-in features that are related to the Pareto principle. It's even got a Pareto chart, which I'll talk about a little later. One thing to think about when you are doing Pareto analysis is also segmentation. Typically, you look at things in totals when you're working with the 80-20 rule, but think about whether you can segment your data and look at things by department or by state as well, because the 80-20 rule might apply even down in lower levels. By the way, if you check out the companion video, there is an example of the Pareto chart. So a Pareto chart is a combination chart of a column chart as well as a line chart. Now, the columns represent the sales value, and they're sorted. So on the left-hand side are the highest sales value, all the way across to the right-hand side, which has the lowest sales value. And with that, there is also a cumulative percentage of sales. Let's use sales as the example. And so the line chart will plot on the secondary axis, which is the axis on the right-hand side, and it typically rises fairly quickly, fairly steeply, and then it slowly tapers off and it plateaus up to the 100% level. And so the idea is that you have a 80% line on there, and when your cumulative percentage hits that 80%, all of the clients to the left of that point are the important clients. They're the ones that are generating most of your sales. Now, unfortunately, the Excel Pareto built-in chart doesn't have that 80% line on there. And the grid lines that are displayed on it are the grid lines for the value rather than the percentage. The advantage with the Pareto chart is that you can just have a list of clients and their sales values next to them. The list doesn't need to be sorted, and then you can use that as the data source for the chart. And part of the Pareto functionality will automatically sort it for you. We can use a combo chart in Excel to mimic what a Pareto chart should look like. In terms of the combo chart, you've got to do a little bit more work. And again, you can check out the companion video to see how to do it. So you can use the unique function to get a unique list of clients. And you can then use the SUMIFS function to get the value of sales for each of those clients. And then there's also a sort function that allows you to sort. With those three functions, you can create a list that you can then create a combo chart that can have the 80% line on there as well as the other percentage lines. So again, check out the companion video, go through the steps to create those. Now, PivotTables. PivotTables also have some built-in Pareto analysis that can automatically sort the values from top to bottom. Unfortunately, the Pareto chart can't use a pivot table as its source. So not all charts can be run off a pivot table, and Pareto is one of the ones that can't be. But you can very easily create a pivot table that's got the sales sorted. Now, adding the cumulative percentage actually is not intuitive. When you create a pivot table, you'll drag the client name field to the rows, and then you'll grab the amount or the sales column to the values section. If you want to put in a cumulative percentage as well, what you do is you drag that amount column again to the values section. And when you right-click that second column of the sales values, there is an option for show values as, and there's another option there for percentage of the running total. And that will give you the cumulative percentage building up, and that's automated. So if you update the data, the pivot table will automatically update that. Something else you might want to consider is adding a rank to the listing so that you can see where the sales values fall in a rank as well. And again, to do that, all you need to do is drag the amount column to the value section again, right click, show values as, and there's a ranking for highest to lowest. And so that'll give you a ranking number. Something to think about is that Pareto analysis over time can sort of show you maybe clients who are building up, and so they might not have been in the top 20% 6 months ago, but they have entered it. So it's always worthwhile keeping a track of how clients are progressing, and some of them might be going down the list. So again, it helps you focus on areas that you might be worthwhile looking into. There's also an option with pivot tables. This is a filter option that allows you to filter the listing so that you can see the top 80%. It's under the filter options, so it's a value option. It's a filter, a value option, and it's called top 10, but it's actually a lot more flexible than that. So you can do top or you can do bottom as well. So it's a top or bottom. You can do by items. So you can say the top 10 items, or you can change the value, and you can change between items or percent. So to see the list of all of the clients that make up your 80%, you can just use a top 10 filter, change it to 80 and change it to percent, and it will only list the entries that add up to the top sales that add up to the 80%. And again, think about segmentation, because segmentation is really easy with pivot tables. Pivot tables have what are called a slicer. So under the pivot table analysis ribbon tab, there is the ability to insert a slicer. A slicer is a filter interface. It's a visual one, so it's really easy to use, and you can just filter by whatever. So you can filter by any of the fields in your table, and so you could filter by state or department or customer category, however you chop up your sales. Segmentation is also possible with formulas. There is a filter function as well. With the example of the unique SUMIFS and sort functions, you can also insert the filter function in that. So you could change the report just to filter by a state. And again, the companion video has an example of that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was conditional formatting. That's on the home ribbon. There's a drop down there. The second option on the drop down, top bottom rules. That again is very similar to the top 10 in pivot tables. You can do top 10 items or top 10%. And again, you can change that value. I did do a previous article and podcast talking about how you can actually add interaction to these options, because the built-in ones don't allow you to link back to the spreadsheet. So you have to key them in. But you can use some formula rules to get a very similar result. And that allows you to have some interaction, as in you could change a cell on the spreadsheet to update the percentage that you wanted to review. So that was a previous podcast and article on adding interaction to the conditional formats. Okay, so Excel has lots of built-in features and functions that can help you do your Pareto analysis. Think about the other things that you might be able to measure. It is reasonably amazing that it does apply across so many different areas. It does apply in business, agriculture, even sport. So the 80-20 rule is reasonably universal. It is worthwhile investigating, and it can help you focus on the more important factors that can basically give you the best bang for your buck. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Excel Tips, a CPA Australia podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, help others discover the show by leaving us a review or sharing this episode with colleagues, clients, or anyone else looking for the best Excel tips and tricks. To find out more about our other podcasts and CPA Australia, check out the show notes for this episode. And we hope you can join us next time for another episode of Excel Tips.